My involvement with oh gosh, food shelves and food banks and feeding people is really quite a surprise. It started out with actually living in a small town like Westbrook, Minnesota, a town of 750 people. We're talking about just farm families, people who have lived here forever. I mean, it's like any small town, you got a handful of names, and if you're not one of those names, then you probably came here from somewhere else. Well, as I started getting to know myself around this town and getting to know the people in the town, it came to light that we had issues with people needing food. And by getting that food, they didn't have the transportation so that they could, find a food shelf. Well, at the time, we did not have a food shelf in Westbrook, Minnesota. So if there was a needy family out there, they were having to figure out, how am I going to get to a food shelf that's 35 miles away? So then one day, something pops up in the newspaper, or maybe it was a flyer on the wall somewhere, that said they were going to have this meeting down at the community center to discuss a food shelf for Westbrook. Well, at the time, I thought, hey, it's a summer night. I don't have much going on. I think I'll go to this meeting. So I went down to our community center, and there was probably 25 to 30 people from the community who attended this meeting. And the issue that drove this was people needing food didn't have transportation. That was determined by volunteer drivers who were working for an organization, Western Community Action, who were taking these people to Windham, Minnesota, to get their food. Well, it was costing money. It was either costing the individual to get that ride, or if they couldn't afford the ride, somehow that ride was being paid for through Western Community Action. So a few people got together and said, let's see about doing a food shelf here. Well, this is where I kind of came in. We had this lively discussion. Oh, you had your pros, you had your cons, you had the good stories, you had the bad stories. And this went on for probably an hour, hour and a half. We had a few people from Western Community Action that were there. We had people from our local city government. We had pastors from the churches, and then we had just your everyday citizen. And I'll call myself just the everyday run-of-the-mill citizen who walks the streets of Westbrook. We decided we were going to do this. We're going to build a food shelf. Well, somebody had to be in charge. And it was kind of funny how that came about, because a lot of people were immediately looking my way. and they had determined that maybe I should be the person that heads up this. Well, I'm a retired naval officer, so I had a lot of years of experience in leading things and getting people to do things they necessarily didn't want to do. So I took on the task, and I said, yep, I'm the guy. I don't mind giving orders. I can tell people what to do. We'll get the food shelf built. Well, here's the really beautiful thing about this whole deal. Our Economic Development Authority bought a building, in the building I'm sitting in right now. They purchased this building, and they put money into the building to remodel it, make it usable. This was a building that sat vacant for 18 years on Main Street in a small town. And as we all know, the small towns are starting to disappear from the landscape. Well, it was an opportunity to save a building on Main Street and try to keep some of that life going in a small town. So they bought a building. They remodeled the building. I went to a city council meeting, and this is how things can be done in the small rural parts of a state. The keys to the building were slid across that big fake mahogany table, and I had the keys in my hand, and we now had a food shelf. All we needed to do was provide shelving, find refrigerators, find freezers, figure out how we were going to get food. I mean, the list went on and on and on, because when it comes to building a food shelf, in order to feed the hungry, there is no book. There is no plan. There's nothing you can go to and follow it step by step in order to provide that type of a service to a community. So we did a lot of trial and error. We did a lot of, lots of meetings, and just lots of really crazy ideas on how we could do something. I had two older gentlemen, and they're kind of like what I call the old school carpenters who came in. And we took old wood shelving and old built-in furniture and stuff, and took stuff apart and recycled the wood. And the shelves that are behind me were all handmade shelves that were made out of wood that we recycled. We had two guys who actually set up a carpenter shop in the back room. So we built this place with as little money as we needed to. And then we had to come up with a color scheme. And this was kind of funny, because when we came up with the color scheme, I remember looking at these color samples, and we had these kind of autumn-like colors that are nice for southwestern Minnesota. And the names of these colors that we picked were vegetable names. We had a yellow squash, and we had pumpkin, and we had tomato, or vine tomato. So all of our colors ended up being vegetable colors. And I'm telling you, in the beginning, it was a little bit hard on the eyes, because it took some getting used to. These were bright colors. We weren't used to the brightness of it. And once we opened up our doors in December of 2009. So it really only took us about 4.5 months to really get this place up and running. But you know, opening a door is not the only thing you have to do. When we opened that door, we had to find people that needed us, and we had to find donors that we needed. And that's the most dynamic thing about serving the needy, is getting them to come forward so that you can provide to them. But more importantly, you need those donors out there who will give you the money, the groceries, the produce, whatever, so that you can serve these people. And in any small town, that's going to be a tough situation to deal with, because you're having to sell this new idea. In the beginning, it was kind of looked at as, well, they're just giving food away. And yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just giving food away. But there was some 17-year-old kid, and I don't even know who this kid is, and it was a quote that they made in some publication that I had read one time, that said, if all you ever think about is being hungry, then you probably won't think about anything else. And it's wonderful that when the young people say these stupid things to us, that these things can be so profound in their background. And that's kind of an approach that we can take here at Mary and Martha's Pantry, is if everybody that is hungry gets fed so they're not hungry, maybe they can start thinking about doing other things for themselves. And what we have done here is we've tried to go beyond the food. We've tried to keep people warm at night by providing quilts that ladies in the community make for us. We've attempted to provide job placement for people by coordinating with, let's say, area farmers or area businesses who might need some temporary labor or maybe even a long-term job. And they can come here, and by letting us know that there's this availability out there, maybe I can take a family that is struggling, who is out of work, and I can put them in touch with somebody that's willing to hire them for a while. And now we've got a family getting a job. We got a family earning money on their own. And what's kind of neat is when that happens, we don't see those people in the food shelf anymore. I mean, they disappear because they're out there, they're taking care of themselves, and they're doing it on their own. It's very difficult in southwest Minnesota to find that so-called 40-hour job. I mean, you hear about them in the cities, and I'm not picking on the cities, but you have so many businesses in the cities, and you have so many people that work the traditional 40-hour work week, and they make pretty good money. Well, out here in the rural area, you don't have all these businesses, and you don't have all these 40-hour jobs. So you have a lot of people that when they are working, they might be working 2 jobs. They got a 20-hour job here and a 20-hour job there. So when you walk around town, it's almost like, does anybody work around here? Well, yeah, they work, but their 8-hour work day goes around the clock. And they get a few hours in the morning, and they might get a few hours in the evening. And because of that, you're going to have, what I think you're going to have is the increased poverty levels in this area. And the nice thing about living here is you don't need as much money to live as you might in the city. And I can use myself as an example. If I stay home, I don't spend much money. If I stay in Westbrook, I don't spend much money. But when I go 100 miles away and I go to a big town and I have a mall and I have nice restaurants and I have nice places to go, then you tend to spend the money. So you can live in these rural areas and you can live quite comfortably on less of an income. But with the people who are making that money, that's just a small part of it. Because you have another small part, which is the people who aren't working, who can't find a job, who maybe due to they may have a physical ailment that does not allow them to work. They may have a mental ailment. There could be a drug or alcohol problem. I mean, there are so many problems that we as people deal with, and not everybody gets to work or is capable of working or can even keep that job. So you have those kind of people that are probably going to get some type of assistance. And that assistance could be a government assistance, it could be a civic type assistance, but you're going to have these people that are on assistance. And you're going to have those people that are taking care of everything on their own. And in between those two groups of people, and these are the hidden folks, and these are the people that we really need to remember that they're out there, are the people that make just enough money that they cannot get any type of assistance. They can't get food stamps. They can't get energy assistance. They can't get min care for their insurance. And they're not under any type of social services assistance whatsoever. And this is because maybe they make $10 too much in a month. Well, those people who are living on the edge have no place to go when times get tough for them. And in this county here, Cottonwood County, we have, it's roughly, about 11%. It's like 10.3% of the people in Cottonwood County are in this category where they make too much money to get any type of assistance, but not enough money to live comfortably or to put a meal on the table 3 times a day for their family. You know, in a perfect world, we would have to say 90 meals for 30 days for each person. Now, that's the perfect world. That means we're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Well, imagine if you're not getting that. And I'm not talking about where, well, I'm busy today, I think I'll skip lunch. Or, well, I had a big lunch, so I'm going to skip supper. Or more importantly, how many of us just don't have time to eat breakfast because we can sleep in another half an hour or something? And I'm not talking about missing those kind of meals. Is think about children and then think about senior citizens. What if, and it's the big what if, they are hungry and when they sit down at the table, there is no food for them to have that meal. And that's something we should all think about. We should think about what it would be like if I were hungry and when everyone else was sitting down for lunch, I had no lunch to go to. And especially with our children. And if our children aren't eating, then we're going to have these other problems in later life, because without the proper nutrition, the child's body doesn't develop properly, the internal organs don't develop, the brain doesn't develop. I mean, we're going into the game already behind the curve, so to speak, because we're not getting the proper nutrition. Our schools do lunch programs. Some of our schools do breakfast programs. Many of our children take advantage of that breakfast and that lunch every single day. But imagine if that was the only meal they got. What happens when they get out of school and they go home and there's no meal there? Well, that's almost like going down a different path. But a food shelf is still there as that small stopgap measure to provide food to that family. Because if that family can't get their food, they need to get it from somewhere. And if we are in a community where the community is providing a food shelf, they are donating the money and the goods to take care of the needy, now you have a community taking care of itself. And it's not just taking care of the rich, and it's not just taking care of the poor. It's really blending all those different people together so that they can take care of one another. You know, it's one thing to have your hand out and have somebody fill it. But there's also something really good about when you have your hands full and you get to lay those hands out for somebody else and empty those hands to another person. And that's probably one of the greatest joys of being in a place like this, is you are working with people who may be at the end of their wits' end, so to speak, who have no idea where they can turn to. And if a person can walk into that food shelf and be able to talk to somebody and be able to get food to feed their family, then maybe they're not thinking of hunger all the time. Or maybe they could talk to somebody about, what do I do now? I mean, we try to be a clearinghouse here of information. We work with the Family Services Agency down in Windham, our county agency, to get brochures and to get information from them. We try to show people that food stamps are available, and here's the forms you need to do, and here's who you need to see. We try to help our seniors with the commodities type foods so that once a month they can get their box of food. We also try to look at the WIC program for the women with infant children and try to get people into the WIC program to make sure that the mother and the child, and of course the father and the brothers and the sisters maybe, are all going to eat healthier. Now the Women and Infant Children program, I wish we could extend that program beyond those ages, because in the WIC program we're teaching a mother how to provide proper nutrition to their child. And it's really silly ways of doing it. Don't buy that box of cereal that's got all that sugar in it. Don't buy the can of fruit that has all that sugary syrup in it. They're limited to buying healthy cereal, healthy fruit, healthy vegetables that don't have all the salt in it. It's kind of a neat program in that it teaches that mother, here's the proper nutrition. And if you could kind of think about it, if you learn how to do proper nutrition once and you just carried it on, there would be a lot of benefits in the long run. But if you get off the program and you go back to sugary cereal and sugary fruits and salty vegetables and all those kind of things, well, now you're just back to where you used to be. And our food stamp program, that's a federally run program. I sometimes wonder if we shouldn't have some kind of limits on what they can spend that money on, similar to the WIC program. At no time are you depriving anybody of any nutrition. You're just focusing them on a more healthy alternative so that they can achieve a healthier lifestyle. Recently, we've heard a lot of discussion everywhere. I do a lot of weekend traveling, and I read newspapers in different towns and in different states, and there's a big discussion about school lunch programs and how the school lunches have changed. Because we went from our old food pyramid to now we're living on the food plate. And the food plate, we want to have half of it filled with fruits and vegetables now. And that's kind of a change for some of us. Schools, they're kind of dictated as to what they can serve. So you hear people complaining about it, and it's not really a complaint. Let's just say it's an observation on their part that, gee, my plate has changed and it doesn't look like it did last year. I've recently gone up to the school and actually sat down and had a school lunch, and I was amazed at how many fruits and vegetables were available to me during that one meal. And that one meal was good. Now, that does not say that that one meal means that the whole program for the year long is going to be perfect. It just means that I had one great meal that had lots of fruits and vegetables. And I think everybody, all of us adults, all the parents especially, they should go to school, have lunch with their child, and find out what are they really serving these kids. Because we all know, as we've gotten older, that everything we did to ourselves as young children or young adults is coming back to haunt us as we've gotten older. We have all kinds of medical conditions that could have been caused just by a poor lifestyle. So you go all the way back, you go back to this place again, and when you walk in this door into a food shelf, we would love to be able to take every needy family and not only put food in their stomachs, but provide them with information to live a better life, with a way to improve their life, and more importantly, to improve the community that they live in. Because the more producers we have in a community, the much better the whole community is going to be. We've also gone to another step in our evolution here, and that is we're opening up a self-help legal center where we actually have some attorneys who have signed up to do pro bono work for people. And they're going to help our clients, our customers hopefully, with things like doing a will, or doing a public, power of attorney, to do some of those small legal things that we all tend to run into once in a while, but maybe we don't have the money to pay for a lawyer. And when you think about that, if money drives what we can and cannot do, well, a lot of us are going to go without because we don't have the money up front to do this with. So these lawyers are actually coming in. I think it's wonderful because it sheds a whole new light on the lawyer. And it makes the lawyer look like this wonderful, civic-minded person, which they usually are. It's just sometimes in a movie or a TV show we get a different opinion of them. So now we're going to help people by taking care of some of these small legal problems. And at the same time, we're going to clear some of the backlog that takes place in the court systems. And now our court systems and our justice systems hopefully will operate a little bit better. So it's really amazing how if you just allow your imagination to go wild a little bit, you can take any one of these type of businesses and you can blend them together to make improvements in your community, whether it be the focus being a food shelf or the focus being a dining facility somewhere. There's so many things that we can do. Yeah, it does cost a little bit of money, but we have so many people who might not be doing anything right now, and all you have to do is kind of come up with a crazy idea and then walk out with it, and you can do all kinds of things to help your community. We do. I mean, it's kind of amazing what this Foodshelf has done. It's in the 3 years we've been open, and I find myself going all over the state of Minnesota, talking at food summits, going to area food shelf meetings, visiting other food shelves, seeing how other people do things, going to food banks. I've gone so far as to check out Iowa, South Dakota, and Nebraska to see how they do things. And the neat thing is, everybody's doing it different. Because like I said earlier, there's no book that tells you how to do it. So everyone's doing it different. But everybody's trying to do the same thing. And that's help the people who are in need in their community. Anytime a community starts to go downhill due to poverty, someone has to pick up the mantle, so to speak, and run with it and take that community out of poverty. I mean, we choose to allow ourselves to fall into the poverty thing. We can stand up and fight it. We can come together and we can do some great things because we are great people. But you got to take risks, and you got to stick your neck out. And you got to be embarrassed once in a while, and you got to find out that not everybody agrees with what you're doing. But there's so many wonderful things we can do in a town, and a lot of times it's like, look at school spirit. Look at your high school football team. Look at your high school volleyball team. Isn't it amazing how people will come together and cheer on their teams, cheer on their youth? Well, we should be able to do the same thing in our town. We should be able to come together and cheer on our town and make our town a better place to live. And that's the hard thing, because that means we have to work. That means we have to volunteer. That means we have to put our community first, and we have to do something in our community. Now, many of us, as we reach the 50s and the 60s, we're a part of something. We might be in a Kiwanis organization or a Lions Club, or we belong to a church men's group or a church women's group or something, and we're always doing some type of service in our community. Well, that's all fine, that's well and good for that 50 to 60-year-old and the 70 and the 80-year-olds. But there's something really happening in our culture today, because you need to start looking at the 40-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the 20-year-olds. They're so busy, they're not doing service anymore. You don't see as much service with the youth or the younger people as we used to. And that is something that I think in a community, if we don't stop that slide going backwards, that we're going to find out that someday there is nobody to head up a Kiwanis group and to take care of the needs of the children of the world. That there won't be a Lions group or an Optimist group or one of these other civic organizations. Because when you look at what these organizations do in your communities, they give money, they give time, they provide a service, and they really only show up when there's a need. And it's kind of amazing that if a cheerleader and 5 other girls decide they need new uniforms, they go to a civic organization, and guess what? They get new uniforms. If there's a group of some school group that needs something, maybe to go on a trip, they'll go to a civic group, and they'll get the money, and they'll get to go on that bus trip, and maybe they get to go to the Capitol, or maybe they get to go to Washington, D.C., or some other really neat thing that a kid wouldn't really get to do on their own, because maybe mom and dad don't have that type of money that they can throw out there. So when we do service in our community, it's very important that we start getting the younger people involved. I enjoy going into the high schools and talking to the young people about doing service and about doing volunteer work, because we need them. They are the future of our community, they're the future of our states, and they're the future of our country. So it's very important that we grab them up. I have had several children, high school students, who will come and work in the food shelf here in the summertime. Now that's a tough deal. You've got kids coming in and they're helping serve our customers. Now I'm not talking about counseling or advising or anything like that. They're doing the legwork. They're carrying the groceries, they're helping the customers shop, they're hauling food out to their cars, they're doing things like that. But they're doing something to help their community. And when you do that, you build relationships with people. And I think more importantly for the young people, they develop an insight into what's really going on in a community. You know, there's nothing wrong with being poor. If you're poor, it just means you're poor. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're a dirty person. It doesn't mean that you're really different than anybody else. It just means that your financial status is different than maybe somebody else's financial status. How you got there, that's kind of like, that's your story. But just like if there's somebody with wealth, they got there a certain way, and that's their story. Well, if you're poor, well, you got there for whatever reason. But if the wealthy person or some other group of people can somehow help you come out of that poor status, then your life and your family's life will be much better. And that's the hardest thing that we are doing today. We're giving food so you're not hungry, so you can think about how to improve your life. Then you have to do something to improve your life. Then you have to find somebody to go to, or someone to go to, or some place to go to learn that. Because the life skills, we don't all get the same life skills. We don't all get the same teachers. But if we can work together in a community and bring everybody together, then we could do these wonderful things. And I know they sound like dreams. They sound like things only written on paper and they're little stories, but they're not stories, because that's what our American story is. Our American story is people coming here with nothing, and given enough time, they have something, and then they pass it on to their children. And we need to revitalize that interest again. We need to bring that back to the forefront, and we need to always encourage people to come forward, encourage people to do better, encourage people to improve their life, instead of pushing people down. Not saying anybody's doing that, but we just need to be a little more positive with that. We try to do that here with the food shelf. Now there are food shelves all over the place. In Cottonwood County, we have 3 food shelves. And what are we, a county of about 12,000 people? We've got about 30% of the county population uses food shelves or is on food stamps. We have the Windham Food Sharing Center in Windham, and they take care of everybody that lives in that Windham school district. And then you have Mountain Lake that has a food shelf, and they take care of everybody in the Mountain Lake school district. And then you got Mary and Martha's Pantry up here in the northwest corner of the county, and we're covering the rest of the county. So we would like to think that in Cottonwood County, out in rural southwest Minnesota, that we have 3 food shelves that are covering our county with 100% coverage, so that no one has to go without food. Now there's always going to be gaps, and we always are looking for these little gaps. There's got to be a little pocket we missed. There's got to be a township or some part of a town that maybe we missed. Well, we continue to work to uncover those. We work with senior dining facilities. We work with senior centers, because we want to make sure we get the seniors covered. And then we work with schools to make sure we have the children covered. People in between, see, you only find them when they come out. What I mean by that is, if you know who they are because you've met them on the street, you can help them. So we always are encouraging people with that need to come forward so that we can help them, so that we can talk about a need. Because sometimes the perceived need turns into such a strong belief system that that person is just sitting there believing that they're in this rut, or that they're not in the rut. I mean, older people have pride. Senior citizens have so much pride based on their experiences in life. They may have gone through the Depression. They know that a nickel is a nickel, and you don't just throw a nickel away. You hang on to it because someday you're going to need that. And those people have held themselves up on their own for years and years and years. And now they're in their 80s, they're in their 90s. Maybe an investment didn't go right for them. Maybe they didn't think they were going to live that long, so they didn't save that much. And now they're falling on tough financial times. And none of us would ever want Grandma and Grandpa to be suffering in the home because they were a few bucks short on buying a meal. And we really need to think about those things, that our seniors are vulnerable. I mean, it's one thing to get crazy phone calls at night asking for donations from them or asking for money for a program that they don't need. There's something about, we got to make sure that they get fed. We're making sure they get medications so that they can have a healthy life. So we need to feed our seniors, and it's very important that we focus on seniors. If you've got a senior member in your family, open your eyes to that fact and make sure they're eating. Make sure they're eating healthy. We have senior dining facilities in the county, and I am amazed that a senior citizen will buy a meal at lunchtime, and that one meal becomes, they eat half of it for lunch and then eat the other half for supper. And it's amazing what people will do to survive. But to me, I think they would need more food than that, but maybe they don't. So we need to take care of our seniors and especially our children. And I'm going to say something very controversial about children. It is not a child's fault that mom and dad make stupid decisions. So regardless of how we might feel about mom and dad out there, we still have children out there that we need to provide the proper nutrition to. We need to make sure that they're fed so that they become healthy, so that they develop properly, so that with that, when they turn 18 years old and they go out in the world on their own after high school, we have another productive member. And we need those young people. We need strong young people with great intelligence who are able to do things, because they're the ones who are going to follow you and I when we're gone, and they're the ones that are going to run things. They're the future of our whole country, and they're the future of our world. And how silly that we would forget that we need to make sure we provide the proper development and nutrition for these young children so that when they become adults they can be somebody.
I'm curious. You got a great story, the food shelf. You've kind of disappeared in it. I want to check in on something. I mean, were you a totally selfish, self-absorbed person before you wandered into that food shelf meeting? I mean, is this like Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus, or
No.
what was it? Where's the backstory of this?
That's a good question. I was a career Navy man. On my 18th birthday, I joined the United States Navy and was an enlisted man. And I did 11 years as an enlisted person. And then I got a commission through a program, they called it limited duty officer program. It meant I was limited, that I could not command a ship. And I got a commission, so I did 22 years in the military. And one of the things that we did in the military, it wasn't just going to war. It wasn't just shooting guns or firing missiles or steaming around the world. When we went to places, we did things. We built orphanages. We helped build schools. One time in Singapore, just for giggles, I helped work on a building that was being built in the country of Singapore. But military people, not only do they do service to their country, but they do service to other places or countries when they go there to visit. Here in the States, you know, about the only time you ever see anybody from the military is if there's a disaster. If there's a flood, if there's a big fire, if there's some major disaster, then military people get called in to do some of the work, some of the manual labor that goes with it. And I would say in my background, I always had this service thing. You know, there's nothing better, and to me there's nothing more important than doing service to your country. And when you take an oath that you're going to do this service, and I don't want to get all, I don't know, maybe I do. When you're willing to die for your country, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to save that country, you tend to develop a certain mindset about how things are supposed to work in the world. Well, when I retired, you know, I went out into the workplace, but I always found that I was still doing stuff. I was still volunteering in the communities. I was still volunteering at work. I was doing these small things, but they were just an occasional thing. When I lived down in Texas, we did a deal called Cowtown Brush Up, where every Columbus Day, a bunch of businesses would get together and we would go into a poor neighborhood and we would paint a house in a weekend. You'd send a team of 10 people from your workplace. All the paint and everything, materials were provided for you, and all you had to do was go in there and do all the labor. And it was so cool to do that, and to work in a hot Texas sun, because it's still hot in October, and to be in some poor neighborhood and helping some poor little old lady who couldn't take care of anything on her own because she was old and frail, and then you paint her house for her. And the happiness that you just brought that person, I mean, is worth all the hard work that you put in for that weekend. And the neat thing was you weren't doing it by yourself. You had 9 other people with you that you were doing this work with. So it was fun. And you made a difference in somebody's life. Well, you only get to do those things once in a great while. But when I moved to Westbrook, you know, there's not much here. And I was a retired military guy who could live on his pension up here, who could fish every day, who could hunt every day. What a wonderful life. You got clean air, you don't have any traffic, you didn't have any stress. And I did do the hunting and fishing for a while. But then you get to where there's got to be something more. There's got to be something more that we can do. So I'm sure I was looking for something to do when I decided to go to a meeting that night in a community to find out what the heck are they trying to do. And I'll admit that at the time I had preconceived opinions about all this kind of stuff. I had no idea what hunger was really like, what poverty was really like. I didn't know about needy people, other than I have seen them before. I have seen the commercials on TV. Oh yeah, I've read a few newspaper articles or magazine articles. But none of those people were me, so it never affected me. So I never had to really involve myself in it. By taking that risk of volunteering to take on this project here of a food shelf, and this is where my military background kicked in. As a naval officer, you only believe in one thing, and that is success. Every operation must be a success. Because you do basically sign your name to whatever task you're doing. So if you're going to put your name on it, then you want to be successful with it. And we're all that way. I think all people want to be successful when they are attached to something. Nobody wants to be a part of a failed anything. So this food shelf became very important to me. One, because maybe I was self-absorbed enough to think it's got to be Harry's deal, so I want to make sure that Harry survives in this environment. But I had help. I had a lot of other people who jumped in there, and they wanted it to be a success too. I have learned so much about what's really going on with people, and especially with people who have a need. I often tell people that needy people are invisible people. They are all around us. They are with us every day, but we just don't see them because they're invisible to us. They're probably not sitting in the pew at church with us. They're probably not sitting next to us at lunch with our civic organization. They may not even be working with us, so we don't see them every day. But we probably bump into them in front of the grocery store, or when we're walking down the street, or maybe at the gas station. Who knows where you're going to run into people? But we tend to ignore them, and I don't think it's an intentional ignoring. We just don't see these people. Well, when you come to a food shelf and you work in a food shelf and you run a place like this, now all of a sudden you see people everywhere who are needy. For parents out there who have school-aged children, some night at the supper table, ask your children if they have classmates who go without food, or do they have classmates who do not have a bed, or do they have classmates who do not have a blanket to keep warm with at night. And I think you'll be shocked at the answers you get, because our children recognize the need more than we do as adults. Our children know that their friends miss meals. The children know that Johnny or Susie don't have a blanket. As an adult, sometimes we can't imagine not having those things for a child. I know personally I could not imagine not having a bed for my child or a blanket to keep warm. But what if? What if that really is happening and there are children out there that don't have that? And a child sees it because children talk about it. And this is kind of a silly story. I did a lunch one time with the Kiwanis organization where we have these secret pals, and we partner up with fourth graders. And so for the entire school year, you are writing cards and letters and just little notes of encouragement to a fourth grade child. Could be a boy, could be a girl. And then at the end of the year in May, you get to have lunch in the school lunchroom, and you get to meet your child. Actually, they get to meet you. They get to meet you because you're their secret pal. And last year, I'm sitting in the cafeteria with a bunch of fourth graders, and it was kind of funny because kids don't know about confidentiality. Kids don't know about all these things because they don't know that what they're doing is, we don't want anybody to know that we go to the food shelf and get food. So I'm sitting at a table with 3 or 4 other kids, and all of a sudden a bunch of children come over to my table, and they're like, "Oh, it's Harry. Harry's here." Because they know me from the food shelf because they and their parents come here to get food. Now, I wouldn't tell anybody who they are, but see, children aren't hung up on all these things that we're afraid to speak about, and they had no problem. They had no issue with getting food from a food shelf versus getting it at the grocery store. And I'm always reminded when I'm around the children of how open they are to things that are in their lives, where sometimes as adults we do become too protective of that information. I mean, the children are, you know, they're our best asset that we have for the future. And I have to look at where, well, I must have had a good childhood because I like to think that maybe I turned out well enough that I could help others, and we should, you know, we want to pass that on to everybody else. I think all of us have it in us to do good things for others, but there is nothing more frightening to some than volunteering. The first few times a person volunteers is a real eye-opener to them, because not everybody is born to be a volunteer. Not everybody can just put themselves out there and can stand up to others. Because one of the things that we do as a volunteer is we have to listen to what is being said to us. And sometimes the stories that we hear are not always easy to handle. And we have to take that story in. And it's almost like you carry the weight of others inside you. And sometimes you get too much information. And that can be really difficult to carry around too. Because as human beings, we tend to judge. I mean, we're all guilty of that once in a while. And sometimes when you know why a person is where they are, you might judge them on that. And that can be difficult too. It's to work with people different than you is probably one of the biggest challenges we all face. I mean, when we just, all we have to do is look at our friends. We look at our friends and just ask ourselves, why are they my friends? Well, it's probably because they look like us, talk like us, act like us, think like us, do the same things like us. Not many people have friends who are so opposite to them. You know, so we tend to group ourselves amongst like-minded people. Well, when you are volunteering, you get the opportunity to deal with people that aren't like you. And you get to learn, you learn more about people, you learn more about human nature, you learn more about human tragedy, you learn more about human success, because every day you're getting to deal with somebody that's not like you. And when I say not like you, I don't mean it in a positive or a negative way. I just mean that the person you're going to talk with is probably not somebody you would have ever developed a relationship with before. And I think it's wonderful that we develop these relationships, because if you are in a service type environment where you are serving others and helping them, the only way you can do that is to have a relationship with that person. And it doesn't mean that they're going to come knocking on your door every night. It doesn't mean you're going to be sitting down and having coffee with them every day. But you're going to build a comfort level so that they can come to you for help, and you are okay with helping them. And I mean, we'll all do that. We see it more in our small towns than you will in a big city. We know who our neighbors are. We may not like our neighbor, but we know who our neighbor is. We may have a wonderful neighbor. We even know who the people might be 2-3 blocks away. And when things are bad, when there's a storm or a big snow or something where people need help, neighbors are helping neighbors. And that's always wonderful, and we'll always hear about that in the media, how the neighborhood came together to help each other to clear the trees that were knocked down by the tornado. Well, that was a 2-day thing. Tornado came, it went, left damage, people cleaned up, boom. But on the 3rd day, what did they do? Were they still helping each other? Were they still talking to each other? See, that's what's important, is that the people keep helping each other day to day to day. And I think we have that in the rural parts of Minnesota. We definitely have it with the people who have been here for a long, long time, because it's the only thing they know. But us transplants who come from other places, we bring our ideas and our culture and our big city attitude or our little town attitude from another part of the country, and we bring it into these towns, and we think that we should change the town to reflect us, when what we really need to do is find out how can we blend in with that community and be a part of it. And we see that with not saying anything bad about city folk, but if you're coming from the Twin Cities and you're moving into the country and it's a new experience for you, you're going to find out that a lot of the things that you took for granted in the cities aren't available here. We don't have a bus service. We don't have a taxi cab. You can't just get up and go whenever you want to. Walmart is 36 and a half miles away. I mean, when you live out here, you're the 11% of the country that lives further than 20 miles from a Walmart. And when you start thinking about that, that everyone else has a Walmart in their backyard and you don't when you're out here. So you believe in Main Street businesses, and you believe in spending your money in your community and in your county. It changes the way you live, because if you don't, then you'll have no place to live, because your current town that you reside in is going to disappear. So we all struggle in rural southwest Minnesota with how do we keep our town alive, how do we keep it vibrant, how do we provide a place for our children, and more importantly, what can we do to get our children to come back when they leave to get their education.
Well, I mean, we have about a minute and a half when you've named the big one that comes up with everybody. Can you solve that one for us in a couple minutes? How do you get the children to come back?
How do you get children to come back? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you came here.
Yeah.
Presumably, you could have lived in Annapolis and
Yep.
hung around with old
Yep.
Navy guys, or you know, I mean,
Mhm.
and there's better hunting, I think,
Yeah.
in Wyoming places
Oh, yeah.
than here. So, how do you get the children to come back? You
Uh.
came back. You could have lived other places.
Well, in my case, it wasn't a comeback, because when I came here 10 years ago, it was the first time for me.
Oh, okay. So
So,
you voluntarily.
Yeah,
entered.
I showed up. It was, as we get older, it's so much easier when you're older. I was 50 years old at the time. I was looking for a less stressful environment. I was looking for a less crime area. I had come out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we're talking, when you get on a highway, there's a gazillion cars around you. Now I live in a place where when I drive 32 miles to the nearest red light, I might give a one-finger wave to 5 or 6 cars on the road during that 32-mile stretch. The crime is pretty much non-existent. I mean, there's still going to be crime out there, but it's not like it is in the big cities, and anybody that watches the news knows what that's like. So how do we get our kids to come back? The only way you can get the kids to come back is you have to provide them with an environment that they can raise their family in. And in order to raise their family, they need to be able to earn a living. And you cannot earn a living when the only job available is a gas station or a part-time job or seasonal work. I mean, if you're going to work construction, winters are tough here. And there's only a few months of good weather where they're doing outdoor construction work. Well, you're not going to make enough money in 3 or 4 months to live the whole year. And you can't make enough money working 20 hours a week, because you've got to pay for daycare, you got to pay for gasoline, and you got to pay for your health insurance and everything else. You're not going to be able to do that on 20 hours a week. So until we can somehow provide jobs in the rural part of America, we're not going to be able to get these kids to come back. I can live here because I have a military pension. I cannot live an extravagant life, but I can live a good life. And I can live quite comfortably here. I mean, I have to pay attention to what I'm doing, what I'm spending my money on, but a person can live comfortably here. But I'm living here by myself. It would be so much harder with a family. Children are expensive when they're in school, because ask any parent, how many miles do they put on the car running back and forth to sporting events or concerts or school events? And I know mothers around here who make 3 and 4 trips to the school every day, because they're having to haul this child to one place, that child another place, that type of thing. So until we can somehow bring a method of employment, and I don't know the answer to that, because it seems so simple. Well, you just build another factory, or you just build another whatever. But if we look at what's going on in our country, manufacturing's down, factory orders are down, people are out of work, they have no place to go for the job right now. There are, and I know, and I'm just making up this percentage, but I'll say there's 10 or 15% of the people in America who, no matter what happens, can find a job. 10 to 15%. You know, because they can do anything, they're willing to do anything, they will always find a job. But there's 85% that aren't going to make it because there's no place for them to go. And if, well, I don't want to get too political. I don't want to get political, but I'm going to say this though: if we put everybody on a system where they're constantly provided for, without doing anything in return, I don't think we're serving the best interest of the country. If we just give people money, if we just give them whatever they need to live on, I don't think that has helped us at all. Because then we learned to just accept that. People who come into a food shelf, just because I give them food, my real goal is to cure the hunger thing with them so that they can move on to other things. And I think it's very important to note that not everybody that uses a food shelf is scamming. Not everybody who uses the food shelf is just trying to put an empty hand out there so that it can be filled. The majority of the people who are using food shelves are people who really need the help. So if we bring our children back, you know, it's sad if a child comes back with a college education and they have nothing to do with that education. I mean, no place to go with it. And then all they have to look forward to is coming here and, well, I can always get food at the food shelf. And, you know, that's not what we wanted. That's not our desire in this country to do that.
I've been thinking about this, you know, from the beginning of what we've been talking about, like, why are people hungry? What can we do beyond something that's a stopgap measure? And one of the things that I often ask people is if they could change anything in the way the food system was organized, or change anything in society, because, you know, especially when you were talking about service, being able to have people participate in service requires that they're not working several jobs, and, you know, that they're not just right at the edge of where they can make things work barely, you know, $10 short from a barely.
Sure.
So I'm curious what you think I mean, especially in a place like this, where food is kind of everywhere. You know, like, we are in the middle of a huge producer state.
Yeah.
Like, what kinds of things, from your perspective, do you think could be shifted, even just only so slightly, so that there were ways to get beyond this situation where people work all the time but can't make ends meet, and work producing food but can't afford food? Is there a place for food livelihoods? I mean, for
I
I know it's a hard
no,
question.
that is a very difficult question, and it's not the first time I've heard it, and it's not it's not something that I needed to be asked to think about, because say in this environment, your mind opens up to so many things, because every time a family comes in the door with their story, you know, let's face it, I'm a man. Men fix things. That's the way we're made up. I mean, our brains work that way. So we just fix everybody's problems. And I know the ladies out there will probably disagree with that.
My husband complains that I'm a fixer.
Yeah.
So,
But in this part of southwest Minnesota, the wage that is paid by employers is not sufficient for a family to live on without assistance. And let's see, in this region, which would be the 9 counties of southwestern Minnesota, I think it's 26%, no, it's 38. 38% of the employers in this part of the state do not pay a wage sufficient for a family to live on without assistance. I personally think wages are way too low here. And that's because I have lived in other parts of the country where, man, people were getting paid some good money for doing a lot less work. Of course, my background was more in a technical and administrative area, whereas here we're going to see more common labor. I used to vaccinate pigs here when I first got up here, and I did that for 2 or 3 years of giving vaccinations to pigs for $13 an hour. Good money for up here, $13 an hour. You know, I didn't get any health benefits. I didn't get any benefits other than the joy of vaccinating 2,000 or 3,000 pigs a day. But I thought, wow, $13 is good money. But it was hard work. It was a harsh environment. It smelled. It was hot. I was dirty. You couldn't get the smell off of you even after you showered. But it was vital, because how else are you going to have bacon at home unless there are people doing that work? I used to work with children in the hog barns. I brought my daughter, who was going to school at Gustavus, and she came one time and worked in a hog barn. She's like a city kid, and she learned, wow, this is what it takes to make bacon. This is how we get a ham. I mean, somebody's doing this type of work. But we need to improve the wages in this part of the country, and I'll just say in Cottonwood County. Second thing I would do, and this is controversial. Social services system needs to be overhauled. And by that I mean we need to be serious about looking at our social services and finding out what is it going to take for a person to get those services. We need to start getting something in return as a country or a government. You can't just give people things so that they can live. Because when you give people everything they ever need without having to work towards it, you have taken away their human dignity, and you've just taken everything away from them, basically, because they have no purpose anymore. And people must have a purpose in doing something, whatever it is. I kind of wish we could go back to the days when people did service to get something. Where if you worked 10 hours in the library, then maybe you could get, I don't know, some type of monetary assistance from a social services group or something. Because we need those people working in the libraries. We need people cleaning roads. We need people doing work. You know, when I was a child, when a child got in trouble, I lived in a town that had brick streets, and they would give us a push broom, and you had to sweep the street. Well, try sweeping brick streets, because sand and everything gets caught in between the bricks, and that was kind of our punishment. And you learned a valuable lesson, but you got your street clean. And I'm not saying we punish people who need social services assistance. I'm saying we need to involve them somehow so that they can give back for what they get.
Well, and part of what you're saying connected to the previous thing is we need to make jobs that people can
Yeah,
have. I mean, 'cause a lot of this
we
is,
have to have jobs for people, which means if you're gonna create jobs, then you have to make it so that the small business, because everything here is going to be small business, you got to make it viable for the small business owner to be able to hire those people to do the work. I try to look at things from that perspective of I need a job done and I want to hire somebody to do it. Why can't I just go out and hire 3 people and say, hey, I'll give you $20 an hour if you'll do this, this, and this. And they come in, do their $20 an hour, and they're done with it. Boom. Now they got money in their pocket. But if I have a system that says, based on the fact that you just worked, I'm going to cut your benefits, then I don't think we're going in the right direction. Because once you encourage somebody to work, you've got to, once they get into that job, they need to collect a paycheck so they can see that it's worth working. And that could take time. Maybe it's going to take 6 to 8 months for somebody to really get on board with, woohoo, I'm doing it on my own. But I just think I think our approach is kind of off kilter. We really should be saving people from themselves and allowing people to take care of themselves. It's like a self-defense. If we teach self-defense courses for people to walk the streets of Minneapolis, as an example, then we need to teach people self-defense on how to take care of themselves in this new world. So,
That one totally unrelated question
Okay.
to that, but I'm curious. I mean, part of what seems really valuable about what you've been saying is trying to get into these kind of more hidden stories. And I'm curious if there are people you think we should talk to, or other ways to get. I mean, there are so many parts of what are important in the Minnesota food system that are not what people think of when they think food in Minnesota. And I think it's one of the valuable things, you know, to be able to get into those. That's why I've been kind of excited about what
Yeah.
you've been doing.
let's see. How would I approach that?
I mean, especially because, and, you know, I was thinking about it when you were talking about vaccinating pigs, like these pieces that people don't get to see, that aren't the glamorous parts of, you know, we hear so much about chefs.
Well, okay. There's been recent stories on the media about children in school in the cities not knowing that milk comes from a cow because it comes
Right.
in a jug at the grocery store, and that's all they know. Or bacon comes from a pig, and because they're not able to see these things. You know, I don't know, maybe schools don't take field trips to the farm anymore because it's probably the liability insurance won't allow you to bring all these children in to see the place. I can not speak with authority, but with some knowledge of hog producing due to airborne illnesses and bacteria and these kind of things that could be tracked into a hog producing facility. You have to take special precautions to go in there. I mean, you suit up, you put on boots that have been disinfected and all this kind of stuff. So it's not like the old days where we could just bring 60 kids into the dairy and stand behind the cow and watch them all get milked and go, wow, now I know where milk comes from. But in this rural area where you're producing grains and livestock, you know, it's a different type of work. And the people who do those jobs love what they do, or they would not be doing that kind of work. It's a different type of people. You know, it's just like if a family from the city moves in here and then they're looking for work, and if I say, well, you might be able to get a job helping with planting or harvest, can you drive a tractor? No. Well, can you work in a hog barn? I don't know, I've never done that before. Can you, you know, any of this agricultural type work? It's because they don't know how to do it, or they're not willing to learn. I have found that what most people are looking for employers or employees around here, this is so ridiculous, but it's so simple. They want to hire someone who will come to work on time, has their own transportation, and is willing to learn. And if you are those three things, you will get a job in this area. But if you can't get to work, or you don't have reliable transportation, or you think you already know it, because I've worked for farmers around here who have said, go ahead and you take the John Deere, or you take the case, or you do this, and I'm like, this guy just entrusted me with his $100,000 asset. And it just told me to go drive it. Let's go take off. Because that's what a job entails around here. It requires an employer to really put a lot of money on the line so you can make $12 or $13 an hour. And it's a little different than punching keys on a cash register somewhere. You know, but even there, you don't have those kind of jobs. So. We have the people here are really hard-working people, and I think one of the most difficult situations is it's not day in, day out, 9 to 5, 9 to 5, 9